Hey guys, we are here again to summarize the work ethic portion from the book of Proverbs study. I'm here with Amanda. I think Amanda's going to have some particularly good insight into this because she was a band director. How many years were you?
4.
4 years. 4 years as a music instructor and band director. I think she was able to see students who worked hard and talented students who didn't. And that sort of thing I think is helpful when you're looking at the Proverbs that we discussed earlier. I guess with that being said, we'll start.
Okay, well, the first thing that we really wanted to address is the fact that work is not part of the curse and the fall. Adam was commanded to work the ground before sin came into the world. So work is not a bad thing. It is not a punishment. We were actually created to work. And I have said to Dwayne over and over again throughout this social distancing time that it's never been more evident that we have a need to work. Because if you're just lazing around all day, you get depressed very quickly. We are actually meant to work.
Right. That's we see that in Genesis 1:15 at the creation of man. It says, Then the Lord God took the man and put him into the Garden of Eden to cultivate it and keep it. And that's from Genesis chapter 2, again, like Amanda said, predating the fall. So before the fall, man had the mandate to work. It's part of what people were designed to do.
And we are made in the image of God. God isn't lazy. God has stuff he does.
Right. God is working even now. Jesus talks about this some. Even now, God is at work, holding all things together. Mm-hmm. And if God were to cease to work, then the whole universe would fall apart. And so, being created in the image of God means we are beings who work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. After listening to Dwayne's first session this week, it kind of struck me. Some of our high schoolers have said it's taking them like 30 minutes to get done, whether it be a day or just a few minutes on Monday, and they're done with their schoolwork for the week. Teachers likely are not giving you new material because they're not there to teach it. So they're likely giving you review of things that were hard, so it's not taking you that much time to get done. What are you doing with all the rest of that time? This hasn't affected us greatly because we homeschool, so we're used to being in the home. But we do have a lot of activities, so we are out and about. But the increase of laundry and the increase of dishes has been somewhat staggering because we're not eating out at all, which has been good for the budget. But it's so what are you doing for your parents who are likely the anxiety level is a little higher right now? So what are you doing outside of your schoolwork to pitch in around the house?
Right.
The hardest step to take in your work is often the first. You talked about, are you getting up and doing? What are you even getting started? And I've noticed that for myself, if there's a task that I am anxious about or I don't want to do, the hardest thing to do is take that first step. So what is causing you to not take that first step?
Right.
And always do the hardest thing first, so your day goes more smoothly. It's very easy to put off the hardest thing, whatever that may be, or the thing you dislike the most, and then you just end up not getting it done.
Right. Amanda, after listening to the talks, had a ton of practical things that she said applies, and these are things that she does around here already, and that helps her in applying the things that we talked about in the Proverbs lessons. So that's one of them for her, is doing the hard thing first, the thing that you dread the most. She does that with our kids.
With schooling.
Homeschooling, yeah.
Right. We end our day with them playing quietly while I read to them, because that's the easiest thing to do at the very end of the day. We still need to get history in. We still need to do read aloud time where I read a novel to them. We still need to do our theology. But we start the day with math and with reading, because those are the harder things. They love science. Those things are easy. It's the math and the reading that is hardest. And I used to save that to the end, and then I'd beat myself up because we didn't get to it, and do the hardest thing first.
And during the shutdown, students and adults alike are probably dealing with time management issues more than they ever have. That's just to say their boss is not right there on top of them, and the teacher's not right there to tell you exactly how you're supposed to be spending your time. So you have to do that sort of thing. And so getting started is actually more of a problem than it has been in years past for you, more than likely. So,
And not having the thought that failure or not doing things is even an option. I was raised in a single parent home. My mom worked her tail off. She has fantastic work ethic, and she instilled that in my sister and I. But when I went to college, I was always baffled by the people that would fail classes or just not go. I'm like, because failure simply was not an option. It wasn't. Of course, my mother is my soft place. Of course, I could go home to her, but she didn't raise me to believe that I can just fail and that's okay, or I can just decide to not do something and that's okay. People who are lazy are very short-sighted. Like, doesn't matter. I'll get to it. Whereas people who are wise in how they use their time are very long-sighted in I'm not going to fail. I'm going to set myself up to be successful in life by doing the laundry now, or doing my homework now, and having a good work ethic. So.
Yeah. And this reminded me, her saying that actually reminded me of a military general who was overseeing a graduation. And they said, how do you be successful? He's talking about how to be successful with your day and with your life. And he said, start by making your bed. And that really is saying, get started. Mm-hmm. Get started with your day. Get up, get out of bed, do the things you're supposed to do. Start by making your bed. Start with these, just get started. Mm-hmm. Get to doing, get to acting.
Yeah, a saying in my house growing up, and I don't know where this came from, but how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. That's what my mom would always say to me. It's like this big thing that you've got in front of you. One bite at a time, baby. Just one bite at a time, So,
right.
Tackle it. Get started. Let's see here. Session 13 kind of brought to mind a story about myself. I was raised by a very athletic mother, and my sister took after her, and so we did basketball as kids, and we did tennis, and my mom used to get a kick out of me because when it came time to go to team tennis, I hated it, but I wanted to take lessons forever. So I enjoyed the athletic things, but I didn't like competing in athletics because I'm just not very athletic. It's not enjoyable for me. But anyway, my mom went on to find, which is actually quite the tribute to her, she got me involved in music in 7th grade, which is completely out of her wheelhouse. The woman is incredibly athletic. That's where her light shines. And so she got me in band, and it's where I found my talent. But I've never been naturally talented at anything. I've always had to work very hard. And I actually remember when I got my flute. This is a very vivid memory because it's so indicative of how my childhood was. My sister, it always felt like everything she did turned to gold. Like she just had natural talent and ability in so many ways, both in athletics and music and her academics, all of it. And she picked up my flute, and before I even figured out how to make a sound out of it, she did. It's like, so frustrating. But my mom always called me Cream because I rise to the top, and I worked my little tail end off on flute. I practiced for hours, and I would do quite well, but it wasn't because of natural talent. It was because slowly as Cream rises, I would rise to the top in my music, and then she called it my light. It was where I shined.
Right. And you saw that a lot with students.
Yes.
At school, right?
I'll take a hardworking, mediocre student who can excel because they work hard over someone with natural talent any day.
Right.
Because those natural talent kids so often didn't work, and it was just so frustrating to watch them throw their talent down the drain.
Right. Right.
So, yeah.
And I think you see that all the time out in the workforce. I think you see it often, even in education. You see it all over the place, that the people that work hard and are diligent are going to be those people who succeed. They're going to take what they have and they're going to go far with it. And I think that's what you see there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And in your next session, you talked a lot about excuses.
Right. They go hand in hand.
Yeah.
These two things go hand in hand.
I have actually taken, to the best of my ability, I have taken the phrase, I don't have time for that, or I didn't have time as an excuse for not doing something out of my vocabulary. Because I'm actually busier than I've ever been. You know, I homeschool 2 kiddos, and I stay at home, and Cart Haddon to therapies, and Lydia to her co-op activities and gymnastics, and I'm busier than I've ever been in my life, but I still have downtime, you know, and downtime's not a bad thing. You should have downtime. But if I don't get something accomplished, don't tack the I didn't have time to do that on there, because of course you did. You know, I don't know of any student in our ministry who has every moment taken up. And if you, instead of saying I don't have time for that, say I didn't make time for that. I haven't made time for that yet. And it's okay to say no. It kind of takes the guilt of excuses, because I always feel guilty when I give excuses. Takes the guilt of giving an excuse away, and puts the ownership back on you. I didn't make time for that, and you can deal with yourself as to whether or not that was something you should say no to, or something that you need to make a priority. Make time for your priorities.
Right. I think the excuses portion of the Proverbs are really funny. The lion in the streets excuse is, to me, it's hilarious.
Yeah.
But how many excuses have you heard when you were a band director doing private lessons for students not knowing the stuff they were supposed to work on the week prior?
I don't even.
See, there's frustration there. And were the excuses humorous? They were so bad.
Somewhat,
sometimes?
yes. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's the way that it works out. Laziness somehow makes people feel like they're smarter than everyone else, and these feel like these excuses are really good, and then they're not. They're really really horrible. So much so they're sometimes funny. Yeah.
And they can be the most difficult people to talk to.
Yeah.
People that are lazy and they're full of excuses, and it's because I think the very lazy people have really bought into their excuses. It's not something they say just to save face with a person anymore. It's something they actually believe.
Right.
So they're just the most put upon people. My goodness, the poor pitiful them that they can't get anything accomplished, and it's just so sad. When Dwayne was talking about the excuses, the lion excuse, I have been rewatching The Office, and one of Ryan's excuses to Jim came to mind, and it just made me laugh. And he told, when Jim asked him to do something, he said, I would rather not do it than do it wrong. And it just made me laugh. I'm like, it's a lion in the street, you know, it just is so funny. But I will say that excuses are the outplaying of a man-centered worldview. You give an excuse to either please the person that's asking something of you or to pacify yourself. So it's all about man. Whereas using your time wisely and working toward Christ's likeness is the outplaying of a biblical worldview and only caring what the Father thinks about you.
Right. Because ultimately and this goes back to the Genesis 2 passage we talked about at the beginning, that God is at work and God is working, and we are created in the image of God, and for us to be people who are displaying the image of God rightly and becoming more Christ-like means that we are people who are working. We are people who work. And having a good work ethic is part of that, is displaying the image of God to people well. So.
Should you have downtime? Of course.
And that's built into the seven-day week.
Yes.
In the Bible. The Sabbath, which was Saturday back then, the Sabbath was a day of rest. There was to be no work done on the Sabbath. So yes, there is to be a built-in cycle of work and rest. But they were working when they were supposed to be working, which back then was 6 days a week. We now have a 5-day work week. But some would argue that you need to spend your 6th day working around the house, and I think most everybody does that anyway. But so it's built into this cycle of work and rest. You have this built-in cycle of busyness, of good, godly work, and then rest. So anyway, we'll be back again, like I said, next time, and hope this was a blessing.
All right, so bye.
Bye.
Oh, Lydia, you want to say bye? All right.